Hello, Gamecock fans. I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. Welcome to Ball Don't Lie, SGTV's premier live sports show.
JP and I will be giving you our weekly insight every Sunday.
This week on the show, a dramatic week 3 across college football, especially for the Gamecocks.
And later, we'll be checking in on USC's men's soccer team and Cock hockey.
Be sure to stick around for head-to-head football pick'ems.
Without further ado, welcome to Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome to the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio.
I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry.
This is the one where there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer.
I'm always the get-back game guy.
There's so many teams with so many good wins.
Because, they love seeing Clemson lose no matter what.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that love seeing Clemson lose.
Yeah,
Return of the King released 20 years ago today. There you go. And for that reason, give me the Noles.
I like being right more than I like being happy.
I think the committee made the right choice.
Florida State did not lose a football game. It's football. This is college football. How can you not be romantic about baseball? It's just such a tremendous sport.
It's time. Is it time?
I think it's time.
This is Ball Don't Lie.
The hype of College Gameday wasn't enough to propel the Gamecocks over LSU, as the Tigers bested the Gamecocks 36-33. JP, really was an excellent ball game there and a tough loss for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, it was. We were there watching it together at Williams-Brice, and the excitement and the environment was one of the best I think we've seen this year in all of college football.
And across our 4 years, I mean, that really, it was an incredible sight to see at Williams-Brice.
Absolutely. Gamecocks took an early 17-0 lead. It could have been even better had a pick six not been called back.
LSU, actually.
Well, yeah, I was going to LSU fought back, but it looked like South Carolina had iced the game on a pick six, and, well, a interesting, unnecessary roughness call on the return off a block against Grant Nussmeier, who played well. Garrett Nussmeier, who played well, did something that I think teams will look to replicate against Carolina, because while South Carolina had a couple sacks, tackles for loss, they didn't wreak the havoc in the pass rush like they did the last couple weeks, because what they did was LSU did a lot of rollouts, mobile pockets. They got Nussmeier out on the run, and throwing back across the field or deep. And it kind of took a lot of it was rolling away from Dylan Stewart, so they really kind of took him out of the picture no matter what he was able to do.
Yeah, they sure did, and I think you're absolutely right. To his credit, he was very mobile, and they did a lot of play action. He would roll right, look back left, so kind of a backside action with a tight end kind of rolling out. He was big for them, kind of a safety blanket all game long. So, again, LSU, I think you got to credit them because they did end up stayed in the game and fought South Carolina against some costly penalties, some that were more questionable than others. But, in the end, they had plenty of opportunities to end the game either way, whether it was after the pick, ended up settling for a field goal. And it's those kind of plays, the drive before the pick six that got called back. They ended up getting a field goal on the drop snap, the fumble that Dylan Stewart recovered. And, a lot of field goals that could have been touchdowns and stuff like that. Maybe got a little complacent as they went up 17-0 at one point. LSU, you gotta give them credit that they hung tough and forced South Carolina into some tough situations. And at the end of the game, Robbie Ashford, I think you got to give him his flowers. Played really well, and it's definitely a story of what if Lenore Stellers was healthy enough to play most.
Yeah, that's kind of the big story there, and how healthy will he be? And the Gamecocks do have a couple weeks against some weaker opponents, maybe to kind of build him back up, and then stuff gets serious with road trips to Alabama and Oklahoma. So it's just going to be about the future for the Gamecocks. And speaking of the future, next week the Gamecocks are going to welcome the Akron Zips back to Williams-Brice for Parents Weekend. And only one all-time meeting between these teams, and it's kind of a memorable one for Gamecock fans somehow, because it was a game that was postponed due to weather, and they played it in December of 2018. And it
very odd.
It was a very, they only won 28-3, and it was very low scoring until the end. So it was like, wow, we might lose to Akron. But Akron coming off a win against Colgate, the Zips of the MAC.
Hard-fought game against Colgate's football team.
The Zips of the MAC looking to get the conference to 2-0 against the SEC after Toledo went down to Stark Vegas and put a whooping on Mississippi State. And the MAC has done a lot of damage this year and in years past in college football. So they're not a conference to be taken lightly. But if there was someone in there to do it, it's probably against Akron, picked to finish 11th in the conference. But they do have a power conference transfer at quarterback, Ben Finley, who has history of defeating a team from the Carolinas, as he's defeated North Carolina when he was the quarterback of the Wolfpack.
Yeah, and you got to kind of point out with Akron that their 2 losses are against Ohio State and Rutgers. So 2 big Power 4 teams, with Ohio State arguably, or not arguably, they're a top 5 team in the nation. Rutgers,
definitely an improving team.
I would say,
Greg Schiano, great coach for them, and they're getting a lot more talented.
Yeah, I think South Carolina is definitely going to have a huge advantage in the trenches, on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. They should be able to impose their will, and I think, if they limit mistakes, they should be able to take care of the Zips, but it's always interesting, and especially I think that's the big difference with Group of 5 teams, more so now than ever, that the gap's gotten a lot smaller.
It has, and something South Carolina's going to look to replicate. They had 7 runs of 10-plus yards against LSU, which accounted for 217 yards total, and they ran the ball very well in general. So even if Lenore Sellers doesn't play, they'll be able to lean on that running game with Raheem Sanders and Juju McDowell and Robbie Ashford. So they'll definitely be able to get in that. They'll get some, maybe some little outlet passes to guys in space. But if Sellers plays, it'll probably be a long day for the Zips.
I think you're right. He had 113 yards through the air, 88 on the ground. So really doing the best of both. And you got to remember this. He played, 1 drive in the second half?
Yeah.
So most of that done in the first half against a solid LSU team. So Sellers, I think that was going to be his best game of the season. Unfortunately, it ended prematurely. But he's going to look to continue things, hopefully against the Zips this weekend. If not, I think Robbie Ashford proved to be a very serviceable backup quarterback. And, again, Rocket Sanders, almost 150 yards on the ground and some huge trunk plays. So I think the Gamecocks should be able to come away with the victory, but, can take an opponent too lightly, especially now as we talked about those Group of 5 teams improving. Millions of eyes were focused on Columbia this weekend, but there were plenty of other games worth watching in Week 3 of college football. And, it seems like every week of college football is a great one, JP, but, the number 1 team in the nation, at least last week's, is, that's old news. But Georgia escaped a nail-biter in Lexington, and, it looked like it was going to be a bloodbath, in this preview after what South Carolina did to them. It was like, well, Georgia should walk in and beat them by 50, and they sure didn't.
Yeah, but, this is a long stretch of time where we've seen, one of these top-ranked teams, and they're almost about to lose. This is for real the time it happens, and then they eke out the win. We saw it in the noon slate with number 6 Mizzou against Boston College. That was a game that we were very excited for, but of course it happened at the same time as the Carolina game. Boston College led 14-3 early, but Mizzou went on a run to go up 27-14 and held on. They really eliminated the Boston College running game, and so I think that's something that Mizzou is going to really kind of look to replicate against SEC opponents that also like to run the ball, like South Carolina that they faced later on in the season. But for the Tigers, it was a great win against a ranked opponent. Not ranked anymore because when you're the number 24 team and you lose, bad things happen. But
however, I think a very valiant effort on the road from Boston College, a team that we talked about it a little bit last week. Very realistic shots at the ACC title game.
Absolutely.
Easy slate the rest of the way. You were looking at the start of the year saying, oh no, they've got to play Florida State. Well, that leads us right into what is happening in Tallahassee. I mean, Memphis goes in on the road, beats their former head coach, Mike Norvell. And, I mean, Florida State looks awful.
They didn't have a chance in this one. They were down 20-3, and they never really threatened. They ran the ball, let's see, I have it, 37 yards on 24 carries
against
Florida
Memphis.
State.
I mean, Memphis is a really good Group of 5 team, but you're Florida State. What happened? I mean, it's bad for
201 passing yards on 30 attempts. Florida State is the first team in college football history to be ranked in the top 10 in the preseason poll, start 0-3, all against unranked opponents. So just a generational kind of collapse for them. And speaking of generational, going to our next game, it was a generational kind of beatdown Notre Dame put on Purdue, bouncing back from that
blew up Purdue.
Bouncing back from that Northern Illinois disaster. The Irish, a lot of eyes were, what are they going to – Purdue's a very aggressive defense. They're going to make them try to throw the ball.
Known for some upsets, too.
Yeah, the spoiler makers. But, Purdue did not make Notre Dame throw the ball as the Irish ran for 364 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground, putting up 66 points. Which is some of the most ever. It was the most ever in the history of this rivalry. It was the worst loss in Purdue history. Hudson Card barely threw for over 100 yards. Many turnovers. And it was just, a return to form for the Irish. They'll come back home against an MAC team. So, hold on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see what happens there. But a nice bounce back for them. And, maybe Northern Illinois is just a lot better than people thought they were going to be. Of course, they have good players, obviously. They played really hard in week 2. But, that game is either going to get a lot more explicable or a lot more inexplicable. Is Notre Dame just this Jekyll and Hyde? 1 week they're the best, the other week they're failing miserably.
Or they finished 10-2 with one of their losses being to
Northern
Illinois.
Northern Illinois turns out to be that Group of 5 bid for the playoff.
And, looking at a preview index, it's kind of them and Boise State as the top 2 Group of 5 teams right now. Memphis has also thrown their hat in that ring.
And Appalachian State, that Clemson game notwithstanding, they're very good.
And another game we'd love to talk about, as we previewed last week, a lot of rivalry games in this week 3 kind of randomly because, some of them aren't conference games anymore. But the backyard brawl happened, and Pitt, with a come-from-behind win, Eli Holstein just ice in his veins, doing a great job of leading the Panthers to another comeback victory just like last week.
Yeah, he was awesome. From 2005 to 2023, Pitt did not win a game when they trailed by double digits in the fourth quarter. They've done that twice in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Already here in 2024. And, it's another great coaching job by Pat Narduzzi. West Virginia, a team with a lot of expectations. Now they're 1-2 to start the year with 2 tough rivalry losses to Pitt and Penn State. Garrett Green had a solid game, but threw for 2 picks. And that was
one
really
late in the game. It was very costly.
That was really the difference. And then our other rivalry matchup, the Wazoo Cougars went into Seattle and took down the Huskies 24-19 on a late goal line stand. They held it on 4th and goal from the 1-yard line. And we're able to, as you heard my voice, was kind of, it's been a long weekend of yelling and talking.
Hey, we'll get to that a little bit later, won't we?
Yeah, we will. But John Mateer for the Cougars, 245 yards passing, 62 yards rushing, 3 total touchdowns. He did really well. Will Rogers in a losing effort, 300 passing yards. So it was a great game. Sadly, it was only on Peacock, so who knows how many people were able to watch it. But Wazoo, on a week where the Pac-12 returned with the addition of multiple teams from the Mountain West, Fresno State, San Diego State, Colorado State, Boise State. So the Pac-12 back up to 6 teams. They still need 2 more by 2026. But speaking of the future, we've done that. I've done that bit already. But we'll move on to next week, where we can expect even more drama with a slew of ranked matchups waiting for us in week 4. And a lot of them are, speaking of conference realignment, these new showdowns between new conference mates. But starting off with this Friday Night Lights matchup between 2 kind of unexpectedly ranked teams, one a lot more expected than the other. But number 22 Nebraska hosts number 24 Illinois at 8 o'clock on Friday, Spencer. Dylan Raiola and Luke Altmaier, 2 of the best quarterbacks early on in the Big Ten. Matt Rule against Brett Bielema, 2 program builders that have their teams kind of rolling here.
And really surprising, I think, about Luke Altmaier, because if you watched him play last year, the Illinois offense was not very good. They've really turned things around. They're already ranked through 3 weeks, and I think, again, that's not something I would have predicted. But Nebraska, I think, does look good. I think you could kind of sense that they were building something last year in Lincoln. You slot in a very highly touted freshman, Dylan Raiola, and, good things have happened so far for the Cornhuskers, but this is going to be their premier test so far. And it's going to shape up to be a fun one on Friday. And moving on to one of, I know, your favorite games, it's the Textile Bowl. On ABC, it's Clemson against NC State. It's in Death Valley, and that one's going to be an interesting one because NC State has not looked anywhere near as good as people have, thought them to be so far.
No, they haven't, Spencer. Grayson McCall left with an injury against Louisiana Tech a week ago, or yesterday. Sorry, still getting used to this show being on Sundays. But they ended up coming back for the 30-20 victory. So we'll see if Ben Rice, the backup quarterback, can continue that style of play, or if McCall will be healthy enough. But NC State, coming off their win last year against Clemson, they've won 2 of the last 3 matchups in this rivalry after Clemson had won 15 of the previous 16. So a little bit of a response by the Wolfpack, Dave Doeren and company, but they've struggled in Death Valley heavily, even in the years where they've been pretty good. So we'll see if they're going to be able to kind of come out with a win there. But Clemson, on the other hand, had a bye week following their destruction of App State, so they'll be rested and ready to make a statement, I think,
And a week 3 bye week feels weird.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's going to be nice for Clemson. You get an extra week of rest and should have had plenty of time to prepare for NC State.
Yeah, and speaking of teams coming off a bye week, one of the more surprising teams of this season already is number 11, Southern Cal. They're coming off a bye week going on the road to number 18, Michigan, the defending national champs, at 3:30 on CBS. Spencer, it's a tale of two quarterbacks in this one as Davis Warren from Michigan got benched against Arkansas State for throwing 3 picks.
I've got a fun fact for him.
Meanwhile, the starting quarterback for Southern Cal, Miller Moss, has been fantastic through 2 games.
Yeah, so Davis Warren, he was 11 for 14. The only incompletions he had were 3 interceptions. So all of his passes were caught. Unfortunately for him, you know, not half of them, but 3 of them for the other team, which is, you know, not the stat you want whenever you say that all your passes were caught. You know, you go from a perfect quarterback rating to throwing 3 picks. So it's been a struggle up in Ann Arbor, really in all of their games, I would say. Again, They struggled a little bit with Fresno State, struggled last week, and you know, it's a very tough matchup as Southern Cal. Miller Moss, as you mentioned, he's been awesome.
Zachariah Branch.
he's bringing back that awesome style of quarterback where you just sit in the pocket and just sling it.
You just sling it. You got your 5-star receivers. You've got your Southern Cal offensive line. You can just get under center man, take that snap, drop back. Carson Palmer,
40 passing attempts.
Matt Barkley type,
and that's what we've been missing. I promise you. Watching the Panthers today in the SGTV office, we thought about talking them on today's show, but we'd save ourselves the heartache. But I mean, yeah, also just in the state of the NFL, we kind of miss that quarterback that sits back there and just rifles passes. Jared Goff is keeping us alive and well with 55 pass attempts today. But we'll move on to another ACC matchup as number 19 Louisville hosts Georgia Tech at 3:30. This one's shaping up to be interesting as well.
Yeah, you know, Haynes King versus Tyler Show, 2 transfer quarterbacks balling out for both those teams. But, you know, Georgia Tech looking to bounce back off of that Syracuse loss that opened their conference play. Louisville, this is their conference opener. And after making it to the ACC title game a year ago, they'll look to get back there. The defense is still strong for the Cardinals, but this is their first true test of the season. And they're going up against a team that's already upset Florida State when they did it. So the book is kind of out on them. We'll see how the Louisville defense approaches it. Ashton Gelati, that great defensive end for them, is going to be active, I think. They're good at limiting the run, which is something Georgia Tech really tries to do. And so it's going to be a battle, I think, which quarterback makes more plays. Haynes King with his legs. Tyler Show can be mobile, but he's more with the arm. Louisville has good wide receiver talent. But this one should be I feel like it'll be a pretty high-scoring game. Or it's not that it's going to be a lot of turnovers. You know, both these teams aren't really sure things yet. So we'll kind of see. I think we'll see the true colors of these teams.
For sure. I think, you know, Georgia Tech, Louisville opens as like a 10.5-point favorite, which I thought was surprising because Georgia Tech has, you know, had a pretty good start. They fell to Syracuse.
Yeah,
last
Kyle
week,
McCord.
In a really good game in Syracuse, I think a team will start talking about a little bit more as they're starting off pretty hot up there. We'll move on to, I think, our 2 best games of the week, I would say, as it's number 12, Utah, going on the road to Stillwater to take on number 14, Oklahoma State. The real question mark is, will Utah starting quarterback Cam Rising play? If so, you know, I think the Utes look to keep pushing for their Big 12 bid, I think. And right now, it looks like these are the 2 teams kind of at the top of that alongside Kansas State.
Yeah, and, you know, Alan Bowman, you know, going into the season for Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon was the star, but he only has 216 rushing yards on 62 carries through 3 games. And Alan Bowman has been really putting the team on his back. And against Tulsa yesterday, he threw for 396 yards and 5 touchdowns. Utah's defense, a lot tougher than that. But, you know, they're going to –
Kyle Whittingham's brand, man. That's
if Cam Rising isn't ready to go, it's going to be only a matter of time until Bowman and company get going. And that crowd in Stillwater's not anything to play with. And so I'm excited for this one. If Rising plays, if they don't, they were down to Utah State. They struggled with Baylor without him. So we'll see. If he comes back, this could be the game of the week. But right now, it's looking like the game of the week. It's where College Gameday is going. It's going to be in Norman, Oklahoma, as number 15 Oklahoma opens up their SEC membership with the number 6 Tennessee Volunteers. Nico Iamaleava and company destroyed Kent State 71-0, while Oklahoma dealt with Tulane 34-19. After the Houston debacle, it was pretty good to see Oklahoma take care of a team. They didn't quite blow them out.
Close till the end,
yeah.
for sure. I mean, it was a one-score game until Oklahoma finally pulled away. But again, you know, this Tennessee team, I think a lot of people were just curious to see how Nico would look. And I tell you what, they are scoring a whole lot of points. They look very good. It's going to be a tough task for Oklahoma's defense. But I think this is pretty clearly the best game of the week. So shout out to Game Day for making a good call, I would say. But this one, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and, you know, how are they going to handle that environment? You know, it's going to be rocking there in Norman. It's a tough place to play.
In their first real test.
It's Tennessee. You know, NC State not looking as good as we maybe thought they were.
Yeah.
This is a whole different ball game for Tennessee. Tennessee has not historically recently responded well to success. We'll see if they can kind of keep that up on the road here. But it should be a good one. You know, if anything, Tennessee is probably going to put up a lot of points. Can Oklahoma match it?
Yeah, that's a safe bet. So after the break, we'll take a quick break from football, and we'll fill you in on USC's men's soccer and hockey teams.
Gamecock men's soccer continues their strong start. Hopefully they can build on it with the game they're playing right now on our YouTube channel, SGTV. In case you hadn't heard, the Gamecock men's soccer team, Spencer, with a strong start, their best start since 2003.
Yeah, absolutely. We were wondering, you know, in senior semester, I was doing a story about the men's soccer team for our sports block, and the archives are so hard to find. I couldn't figure out when their best start before 2004 was, so this very helpful email from Brian let us know that it's since 2003 where they won 7 straight games. Other than that, I mean, this is, again, a record start for these guys, and you know, when you're doing something for the first time in over 20 years, it really tells you that this could be a special group. They defeated USC Upstate 4-0 on Tuesday, September 10th. That was, of course, their last game before the one right now. And, again, we've talked about it all semester. We've talked about it when we broadcast the soccer games. This offense is in a whole new gear.
Yeah, they're in it. I mean, it's insane. They barely scored last year. They scored just 20 goals on the season. They're already at 17. And it's headlined by guys they brought in the transfer portal, like Ethan Ballack from Virginia Tech. But then you got Harrison Meyering, who, like we mentioned last week, with that game against Jacksonville, still looking to get replayed. He's really sitting at 7 goals right now.
And that would give the Gamecocks 20 on the season, so they would be at their mark from last year through 6 games if the one that's not yet finished has been played. And that was pretty quick for me. But, again, that's really impressive stuff. And to go from a complete 180. I mean, if you look at the shots on goal, the goals, the assists, really every offensive metric that this team really struggled in last year, they're now kind of in the top 10 in a lot of those stats.
Yeah, and, you know, they're really pressing it at home, too. And today's game is the third, I believe, in 5 straight. But the next 2 are the most important as they kick off league play. And the Cocks will welcome number 8 Marshall home for Friday's matchup, which could really be kind of the big national, I think, turning point in the season.
That's right. Is one thing, looking at the soccer rankings, me and JP were a little puzzled. Where's South Carolina in this discussion? You know, they haven't lost yet. And at some point when you have a team that hasn't lost, you have to consider them to be ranked. And they weren't even receiving votes, which was really surprising to the both of us. But again, you've got a huge prove-it moment. You drew with number 1 Clemson a couple weeks ago. They play, again, number 8 Marshall this Friday. We're going to shamelessly plug it because it's going to be the 2 of us on the call at 7 p.m. Stone Stadium. So if you're not listening, you better be out there because the team's going to need it. And again, they've really fortified Stone Stadium. It's one of the hardest places to play. It's one of the most crowded places to play. And they're going to look to enter the top 25 with a good performance there. And they're not the only team who's had recent good play, as Cock Hockey had an overtime thriller against the Georgia Ice Dogs on Friday night, incited by a John Riggins game-tying goal with 5:15 left in the third.
Now the Gamecocks come away with it on the boards. Riggins over to Marvin. Marvin fires it on. Deflected by 2 Bulldogs. Pass over to Riggins. Riggins shoots. He scores! John Riggins has tied this one at 3 with 5:14 remaining. John Riggins finally gets a clean shot on goal.
Carolina prevailed in a tense shootout where Jake Pushkar netted 1 and Tyler Tamoyan shut down the Georgia Ice Dogs to seal the win.
Pushkar coming on strong. He goes to his right. Tessino comes out to meet him. Pushkar working in. Pushkar shoots. He scores! Pushkar scores the first shootout. Stewart coming in now. Off to his left. Tamoyan. And Stewart is able to. And it's missed! It's missed! The Gamecocks win. South Carolina comes all the way back, and they win in the shootout.
And Spencer, what a resilient effort by Cock Hockey. Trailing 3-0 in the first period. They got a goal back in the second, but then they still had to net 2 to tie in the third. They did it. They fought back against a great Georgia team. Their goaltender was all over the place. Testino, I mean, he was phenomenal. And this is a team that South Carolina's going to have to play later on down the line to win the College Hockey South. Maybe down the line when they're in nationals, and getting opportunities against those teams early in the year to build confidence and get kind of that experience of, okay, we just got punched in the mouth. How are we going to respond to it? It's priceless.
It really is. And again, you point out the resiliencies. That first period was one of the worst I think either of us have seen from this team. They looked
It could have
flat.
been 5-0.
It really could have been. You got to, it sounds bad giving up 3 goals in a period, but Tyler Tomoyan was fantastic. We'll get to his heroics later in the game in just a moment, I'm sure. But early on, he was the only thing keeping this team from not being down 5 or 6-0 because Georgia had more opportunities and, some key whiffs for South Carolina. Definitely got a little lucky that they didn't capitalize, but, South Carolina battled back. And we talked to Coach Shaw after the game, and it was, he's playing it cool. Like, yeah, we're just putting on a show. There's an AAU official, someone from their office was in town checking out the Plex and the environment, and he came up in the booth when we were in it. So it was really cool to see. But, he said that they knew they had it in them all along, and they sure looked like the team of old in that second and ththird period, especially in those new jerseys.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
the new jerseys you saw in that video commemorating their national champion season. But yeah, it was the new and the old all making contributions. Tyler Tomoyan, in the final moments of regulation, Georgia had a great chance. I think this gets lost and everything. They had a great chance. They almost beat him shoulder high, but he was able to save it between his mask and his shoulder.
And you mean final moments, like the final play of the third period was a shot fired at Tomoyan.
Yeah, and that kept it from being a last-second deflating loss to Georgia, and instead it was a triumphant victory. So they'll come back home in a week or two. They're on the road this week, and so we'll keep you posted on that. But guys like Mark Pineda had a great game, 2 goals scored.
The team's leading goal scorer right now.
The captain, Jake Pushkar, was the lead on both ends and then scored in the shootout. But Tommy Locken was really good on the penalty kill. And the penalty kill was what really helped South Carolina get back into it and set up some great opportunities.
Yes, both teams were committing some pretty silly fouls, I think, which is to be expected. Two rivals
teams that don't like each other.
Don't like each other at all. The game ended. Tomoyan starts celebrating. The team flocks to him. Peter Papadopoulos goes over right in front of the Georgia bench and starts doing this right in front of him. And, you got to love it. It's what hockey's about. Everybody at the Plex was joining them. The glass at the Plex was literally like shaking. People were hitting it so hard. So it was a raucous atmosphere. It was great to be back. And JP, I think that's all we've got for you today. We'll be right back after the break with this week's Pick'ems to wrap up another episode of Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome back to BDL Pick'ems. After week 1, I am thoroughly shellacking Spencer in the standings at 8-2 while he's staying afloat at 5-5. But we'll start out with our NFL matchup starting tonight with the Chicago Bears going on the road to the Houston Texans.
Shellacking me, but can't speak English.
Yeah, what is this, Looney Tunes? But the Bears, after they did win last week, but they looked pretty bad on offense in doing so.
It was the Will Levis moment
the
that
Texans,
them the win.
The Texans are a much better team, I think. Spencer, who do you got in this one?
I'm taking the Texans. They're at home. Their offense, I think, is much more of a sure thing to count on. I'm not out on the Bears, just not this early in the season. They've got some kinks to work out.
They'll get better as the year goes on.
I think absolutely, because their defense is good. They really won them the game against the Titans. Otherwise, I think that one Tennessee should have won. But I think Houston gets away with it. What about you?
Yeah, C.J. Stroud is a lot better than Will Levis. The weapons that Houston has is a lot better than Tennessee. So I think that combined with the Texans' defense against a rookie quarterback, I think Houston will win. It might be a good game, but it might be a tough one too. Moving on to a game I'm kind of excited for on Monday Night Football tomorrow. The Philadelphia Eagles will host the Atlanta Falcons. And while Atlanta had a disappointing week 1, the Eagles got the win in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Spencer, who do you have in this one?
Well, assuming Lincoln Financial Field is a better turf than whatever they were playing on in Brazil, poor Jordan Love is suffering the consequences from the NFL trying to make a little bit more money and move to a new audience. I think the Eagles go 2-0 here. The Falcons, again, did not look good. Kirk Cousins, you got to feel for him because the guy doesn't look like he's fully recovered from his Achilles tear. As he's in the pocket, moving a lot more, carefully around. I saw some kind of tweaks in his form. I was looking at, film evaluation from him in Minnesota versus him in Atlanta, and he just doesn't quite look comfortable yet. And it could come in week 2, as I think the Falcons are a solid team. But I think the Eagles, again, are more safe of a bet. And also, their offense, they were able to get it done against the Packers, who look good today.
Yeah, and the thing with the Falcons is that, the Steelers as a week 1 opponent is pretty tough because that's just a winning franchise. And they still
500 machine.
They still have a great defense. So I think that they'll look a lot better tomorrow night. I think they're going to lock in and kind of, generate more explosives in the passing game and then hand it off to Bijan Robinson, who I think will have a big game. I think the Falcons are going to win this one in Philly.
I think, that would be fun. Not quite sure, but, I think it's going to be a better game than the Sunday night one. And we'll move on to college football now, JP. Of course, we're going to start with the beloved Gamecocks. Akron comes to town next week. It's the first night game at Willie B of the season. JP, who are you taking?
South Carolina. I mean,
South Carolina
Akron
should win. I'm assuming he's sticking with the Gamecocks.
Yeah,
if you pick the Zips in this one,
I'm just saying it's like
oh,
it's Akron.
I see. You just said the word Akron. I got a little confused. Akron.
LeBron.
If LeBron was playing for the Zips, I think this one would be a whole lot more interesting. But South Carolina should run away with this one. The Textile Bowl, NC State at Clemson. JP, your thoughts?
This is one of the best rivalries in all college football, and I think Clemson will be motivated following their loss a season ago. I think they're going to be a lot like they were against App State, where they're looking to prove that week 1 against Georgia was not who they are. And NC State's still reeling. The jury is still out on whether Grayson McCall's to be healthy, and I don't even really think it matters. I think Clemson wins.
I don't necessarily agree. I don't know if it's one of the best rivalries in college football personally. Maybe it's just two franchises I don't really love. But I do agree that Clemson gets it done. I think Grayson McCall, even if he comes back, it won't matter. I don't really believe in his arm to lead NC State to victory, and I just don't think they get it done up front against Clemson, who's just, they've got a huge size difference up there. Southern Cal at Michigan. JP, there's a right answer here on this show.
I'm going with the team that has a quarterback that can throw a forward pass.
This is true.
I'm picking the Southern Cal Trojans. It's a great helmet matchup. I don't know if the actual game itself would be too good. Michigan showed some progress in the running game last week, but it's going to be a lot harder to run on Southern Cal than it is to run on Arkansas State. And when you're going to have to lean on passing in some of those situations, even though it's a Lincoln Riley defense, I think they'll make some plays. It might be a closer game just because it's Southern Cal's defense.
And Michigan's defense is quite good as well. But again, I'm shocked Michigan didn't go to the portal. To me, that made kind of no sense. And they're seeing they're probably questioning themselves now because I think that was an obvious choice. But again, on Ball Don't Lie, I'm going to pick against Michigan every single time. And so give me the Trojans in that one as well. We've got a battle in Stillwater as the Utes head there in the afternoon. Your thoughts on this new Big 12 matchup?
It really hinges on Cam Rising, but what I think I'm going to go with, even if he's healthy, I think this is the game Ollie Gordon gets going. It's a big-time matchup at home, big-time opponent, huge game for the Big 12 race, and I think this is when he kind of has his, all right, I'm back star moment, and I'm picking the Cowboys.
That really would be awesome. I'm going to go with the Utes, especially if Cam Rising's back. I think they're one of the better teams in college football, especially in the Big 12. If he's not, my pick maybe doesn't hold up as well. But again, I think Utah's going to go in. It's going to be close no matter what, just because that's kind of the brand of football they play. They don't get blown out often unless they were playing Oregon last year. But outside of that, I think the Utes are going to keep it close. College Game Day, the game of the week, Tennessee at Oklahoma. JP?
It's tough because this is the big test for Tennessee early in the year. It's going to be a lot of bells and whistles for Oklahoma going into this. I think Tennessee pulls it out. I think it's a close game late, and Imaliva makes a couple big plays. Maybe they get some big plays in the run game as well, but I think they're going to get it done.
Yeah, Oklahoma's defense, I think, is going to have a really tough time stopping this Tennessee offense that, I don't have the stat on hand, but I'd assume they've scored maybe the most points in the country so far, as they've blown multiple teams out by 50 plus. So it's They're looking quite unstoppable. Again, this is their biggest test of the year, but I think the Vols also get it done. Georgia Tech at Louisville, your former school, JP. Do you think the Cards get it done this weekend?
You know, I think we're going to be up here putting up some L's up, baby, L1C4 after this one because, you know, I think Haynes King's going to have to run for his life a little bit against the Louisville pass rush. The crowd there should be really into it. And it'll just be, you know, Georgia Tech struggled on the road against Syracuse, and I think those road woes will continue for them. I'll pick Louisville.
I'm also going to take the Cards. I think Louisville's an underrated place to play. You know, I think it's a tough environment. Georgia Tech, I think, might struggle, and again, their running game is kind of up in the air. So I'm taking the Cards. Cal at FSU. Of course, we had to throw in Florida State because they are awful. JP, are you riding with the Bears like me?
Oh yeah, we're picking the Golden Bears, baby.
Woo!
Cal to the ACC title game, 4-0. The Golden Bears, so back, the best conference alignment pick anyone could have ever made. Cal in the ACC. Who knew?
Yep, the West Coast team dominating the East Coast. They go down to Florida
Pac-12.
State
Pac-12,
and get a
baby.
big win. It's really, we're picking the Pac-12. That's what it's all about. Michigan State at Boston College, another funny one to end it off here.
Yeah, two dual threat, Aiden Childs versus Thomas Castellanos. But I think Boston College gets the running game back going. Kai Robichaud and company. It might be close. Michigan State got a road win against Maryland a couple weeks ago. But I think I'm going to take Boston College at home. I think Bill O'Brien gets his team refocused after the Mizzou heartbreak and keeps them chugging. What if we get a BC Cal ACC title game?
That's one I'm pulling for. I tell you what, that would be super fun. Again, of course, I'm going to take the Eagles because I think, you know, I really do think they're building something. Had a real chance to beat Mizzou on the road, and Mizzou's a top 6 team. You know, they moved into number 5 now?
No, Tennessee jumped them to number 5.
Okay, the rankings just came out, but again, they're a top 10 team. I know that for sure. But I think Boston College gets it done, and JP, we're finally going to stop talking. That's going to do it for this episode of Ball Don't Lie. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and TikTok at SGTV at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv@usc.com. For SGTV, I'm JP Barrett.
And I'm Spencer Ball. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great week, Carolina. Forever to thee.